Thanks. I'll honestly remember my next life when I finally your next life. Excuses. You have a way with words. Your next life. I hope that's not the case. I'm sure when you start getting more confidence in Japanese, you'll probably feel a little bit at home. Um, here's my 2 cents. I'll give you my 2 cents. It's not worth a lot, okay? Excuses. It's not worth a lot. Just 2 cents. It's not worth a lot though. 2 cents. 2 cents. Yeah, Sensei would get on me a lot about it. Very discouraging, but very important in the end. Oh, okay, I see. I see. So 2 cents. My 2 cents. I'm not your sensei, obviously, and I'm not a language professional or anything like that. My 2 cents is that when you are in a learning state, or actively living, I'll explain this a little bit more to clarify a little bit more. When you're in a learning state, being comfortable with change, and being able to output without insecurity. In my opinion, it's kind of something necessary for language learning. Well, let's just say it's highly encouraged. Not really necessary, but encouraged. So, what I mean by this is, if you're actively participating in your life, for example, the more you think about something, the more likely you'll become enlightened to how much you may not know. How much you may not know. And how you frame that discovery, like this realization, is a life lesson for a lifetime. And what I mean by this is, when I see myself be interested in something, I know far well that I will not be able to execute it today or tomorrow or to the standards of someone who is ahead of me. And I am well aware that there are a lot of things I don't know or am able to do at the time. However, it's an adventure to be able to learn those things. If you learn them or you choose to pursue them, the idea is having things to learn means that there are things you can spend your life discovering, right? So rather than be discouraged by the constant chance of, I don't know, having problems and issues or knowledge checking or skill checking, the idea is all of them open opportunities for a life worth living. At least that's my opinion. So it's a little bit alarming that your sensei is making you feel discouraged. I hope that's not what that's saying. But generally speaking, I've had my fair share of being in a teaching and a mentoring role. But in the end of the day, I think it's worth telling someone that, all right, here's what we'll do and see where it'll take us, right? If you're going to be a language learner and you're going to be spending, if you're telling yourself you're going to be spending your rest of your life learning something that you love, it's definitely worth figuring out how you can frame something that will be ever present in your life. there are alternatives. Some people don't like this. Some people don't like being in a learning state. So they can live fairly happy lives with only learning when they need to learn and not optionally learn. As in, they're not going out of their way to learn new things. They're going to practice the things they know and continue refining the things they know. And those people become very successful. They're experts in maybe a particular thing that they're very used to. However, if you're a language learner, you're probably going to have to reconcile constantly being in a learning state. So, however young you are, it's never too young or never too old, in my opinion, to figure out a way, your own way, right? That you can be comfortable with knowing that if you're learning something, that discouraging feeling that you have now has to be some sort of, it can benefit a lot from being a source of encouragement or excitement or something rather than discouraging. Because when you're learning, know that you are always going to have something you're going to be concerned about or worried about or not knowing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be learning anything. So hopefully you can find something like that. Maybe it's your best friend, or like for me, you know, if I had a friend that wanted to learn Japanese, my first comment would be, let's be goofy together. Like, let's be incompetent together and grow together. Because an experience worth sharing makes the experience less discouraging. When I was in science, that is the thing you have to become comfortable with. It is ever present. You answer one question. You might. The question is, you may answer one question and get 1,000 more. And if you're not comfortable with the idea that no matter how much progress you make, there will be substantially more questions to answer. The ones that succeed are the ones that say, my life's work is never done, because they continue to have more questions to answer. So that, in my opinion, is the enlightened state of a person who's comfortable with spending the rest of their life learning something. You may not end up being one of those people. You could be like a balance, maybe like 60% of the time you want to do something that you want to do. Obviously, it's not 0 and 100%. But generally, I feel that most people achieve people who achieve the enlightened state, right? The enlightened state are people who they don't even think about how daunting a task is, or how long it takes to do something, or how far something is. They know that no matter where they are, when they work towards quote unquote an answer or progress, there will be more. It's constantly more. So every step you take forward, the goalpost will move farther. So rather than spending so much time thinking about all the possibilities, which, by the way, there are some people who make some clever ways. Like, for example, I think I'm going to be somewhere in a year. I think I'm going to be actually, I have markers everywhere. So I know where I think I'm going to be in 25 days, in every 25-day cycle. And I think I know. So I just wrote it down and don't think about it anymore. And see if I find out what happens at 25 days. There's a very great influencer that did an interview that had the exact same approach, and it's pretty wonderful. And I'm talking about Mr. Beast. In one of his interviews, he has these videos he made 7 years ago, and he made them for every different milestone. in his life already. The videos are already made, like what he thinks is going to happen in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And when he did that, now he focuses on the process. So he does whatever he can. He could pass that marker that he thought he had, maybe not. And that's kind of a way to alleviate the idea, like, yeah, we're not going to go down a rabbit hole if I don't get to the finish line. Like, well, you don't know if you're going to pass the finish line, miss the finish line, go to a different finish line. So the idea of balancing the two, and learning is pretty much one of them. Every time you learn something, your goal kind of changes. It's hard to know where your goal is if you don't even know what you can know at the time, right? So when I learn a new phrase, there is an opportunity for that phrase to take me somewhere else. So it's really hard. I wouldn't worry. I don't know where I was going with this. I was trying to be encouraging. Yeah. Now you know how to do it unnaturally and naturally. That's all I have to say. When are you going to use the unnatural Japanese? I don't know. At least now you know how to place your tongue and make a certain sound, right? Think about that for a moment, in my opinion. If you were making your, like, let's go back to the original thing. If your tongue placement is creating a specific type of sound, maybe one day you'll have use for it. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. But at least you've done it before. Like for me, I don't know how useful Fujianese will ever be for Mandarin, but it's sure as heck fun to draw comparisons. They might be irrelevant or they might not be. For example, in Japanese, the whole like tongue placement and stuff. Someone asked me a bunch of times. I got asked a bunch of times. We're like, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that you're going to condition yourself into an unnatural pitch accent and then you have to unlearn it? And my thought was, well, I don't unlearn anything, really. I just learn more. You see what I mean? Like, okay, well, clearly I can place my tongue this way and say something unnatural. But hey, when someone tells me how to produce a different sound, it's not that I unlearn something. I learn something more. I learn in addition to that. And no one can really know where that's going to play a role once again. Some of the sounds that I make in Japanese by accident or whatever are the sounds that I make for Mandarin. Some of the sounds that I accidentally make in Mandarin are the sounds that I make in Fujianese. Understanding the interactions between all those things is far more productive, in my opinion, than trying to forget and trying to eliminate your past experience. And being creative about it makes your life ever so meaningful. Every step leads to a new step. So that's kind of the idea, right? Your goals are constantly changing unless you think you're not changing. So if your goals constantly stay the same, the bigger concern for me is, are you growing as you're learning? It is very hard to keep the goals the same if you're constantly learning new things. So, do not be discouraged, right? Your goals will grow as it goes. Your goals get bigger. They might get smaller. I mean, things can happen, right? Like, oh yeah, you wanted to become the best runner one day, and then you realize that your right leg doesn't move as nice. Then the goals change. But the idea is, you've done all the running. Now your goals are different. And you have to find like satisfaction and solace with all the context of what you are given and what you have learned so far, right? I would love to say that most people go out and say, yeah, I'm going to start. I'm going to learn all the Japanese in the world. Like, okay, start. In 6 months, I'm going to ask this person again, right? Like as a teacher or a professor, I would ask this person again, like an academic advisor, for example. In 6 months, right? A semester, I'll ask this person, so what are your goals now? Has your goals changed at all? And explain to me why. I think I would be most concerned with someone who says, my goals are exactly the same because nothing has changed. Like their goals literally have their 6 months of study had no effects on maybe defining the goal some more, or having more questions about their goals, or accomplishing some task that got them towards the goal, but now they're considering things, right? If your goals stay exactly the same, I am more worried about the person, because naturally that would insist to me they have learned nothing. If you truly have learned something, it is very, very unlikely that your goal is explained literally the same again. Things will not be the same anymore. Your goal might have more details and other things, like, oh, now you have to worry about these things. So becoming discouraged by that is a very, very scary thing. And I think as a teacher, it is, I'm not speaking for your sensei, but I would love to have known that the teacher, my mentor, would know this too, and that they would understand that they are able to shape as the person is growing, because otherwise you'll live a lifetime of being discouraged. Every time you learn something new, your goal gets bigger, and it's likely to get bigger, and it becomes even more daunting. And over time, it will become more and more discouraging. And for someone who wants to teach, that's the last thing you want your students to walk away with, right? Hey, we just concluded, I don't know, chemistry 101, and then all your students left your class saying, oh man, dude, we basically know nothing. What are we gonna do? Should we quit now? Let's just go change, change careers. Like, let's go change a different major, because that might be different in a different major. It's like, my 2 cents here, the hot take here is, it doesn't change. What I mean by that is, if it's learning Japanese, if it's learning science, fitness, if you're a learner, if you really like to be in a learning state, your world doesn't get smaller. World doesn't get smaller as you're learning. It gets bigger, right? So the bigger it gets, the more daunting it is. It'll become more and more daunting for people who haven't embraced that, right? The more you learn, the bigger things get. So, in my opinion, I hope you find some way to reconcile it and not be discouraged. Things getting bigger, and it feels like it's forever, like the 200, that it's so far off. In my opinion, it's a very natural state. It means you're learning something. In my opinion, if you keep thinking things become harder, or things are getting longer, and it's taking more effort and whatnot, to me, that is a great indicator that you are successfully learning something. Otherwise, your world stays small because you didn't learn anything. At least that's my opinion. Fictitious, listen. I don't need some sass from you. You know, goals are exactly the same. Anyways, that's a little bit of digression. Hope to feel you encouraging. I think a lot to think about in the projection of some of your goals are. Yeah, when you put it that way, my goals have definitely changed from when I first started Japanese. Yeah, what were your goals, by the way? What were your goals when you started Japanese? My goal, I'll give you an example. My goal when I started Japanese was to find a schedule where I can smile and use Duolingo to output Japanese during that entire time. I started with 25 days. And now I'm at day 133. That was it. No like far off goal, no fluency, none of that stuff. I looked at a goal that I know would be fun, like pretty reasonable, knowing that that's not where it ends. A goal is not the end point. Well, it's an end point of something, but it's the beginning of something else as well. So I put a goalpost arbitrarily out, stretched far enough where I could significantly change by the time I get there. So when I got to goal 25, it changed. So the next 25 is a different goalpost with different characteristics. And then the next 25 and the next 25. And now we're getting close to half a year. You think the discouragement was more from me constantly getting it wrong and him pointing it out? I know he just wants you to improve. Okay. FYI, I have been screenshotting this for reference and motivation. Sorry, no worries. Yeah, it does suck when I get what you mean. The discouragement is getting it wrong, constantly getting it wrong and pointing it out. Are you guys doing new things? Like different ways to trying to add to it? Like if you constantly get something wrong, I'm hoping you're doing something different, right? Over time, as opposed to constantly doing the same thing and expecting it not to happen. If you know what I mean. I think if I find something that is very consistent, then characterizing the consistent trigger and then manipulating that would be a great starting point. So I imagine your sensei is doing something like that for you. I hope. For example, like when someone approaches me with a problem, right? A. And then they're saying, okay, so I asked the person, how are you addressing it right now? How are you addressing it right now? So tell me a little bit about it, right? What is this problem A, and what are you doing about it at the moment? All right, we take that information, right? We take that info and then I will contribute. For example, if I was the person troubleshooting, I will contribute something outside. Something outside this, whatever the information this person provided. Because their information, everything they're practicing is there, right? So I'll contribute something outside, something that is new, and it's gonna be daunting. Because that means you have to get this person to learn something new, right? Learn something new to add to their routine. And then you practice it and see if the problem occurs again. So if the problem persists, right? If the problem persists, then we do it again. You explain how you've done it with the new thing now. So you've done this, and then you've done the new thing, and the problem still persists. Then the person who is mentoring, or even the person themselves, can find input of new information. like a new technique. However, if you have a teacher, generally speaking, your time is invested in whatever the teacher introduced. But then the teacher will introduce something newer, right? Something newer while tracking your progress, right? They're going to be tracking with you now. And then the cycle just keeps continuing until it's done. So, or like whatever problem you guys had or not. So I'm kind of curious if you guys are like testing new strategies and things. I'm guessing the whole time placement thing is the new strategy or something like that. I don't know. Just guessing. Yeah, it's I think it's very natural to be very concerned about getting things wrong. Like that means you are concerned with learning, right? And sometimes being daunting and excited can happen at the same time. I'm kind of excited to try to solve your problem, actually. I don't know what it is right now. I don't know what your problem is right now, but it's kind of fun to brainstorm about the problems. I like solving problems. So anyways, yeah, things get bigger and more daunting when you're learning. So many things. Do it with a smile, I suppose, or at least try. Okay, 送他 no 送他
我想送他巧克力。
yeah 送他巧克力
我也会送他水果。
This feeling was in the beginning, but yes, he did change things. I see. Like his approach topic-wise. Okay. We're just going back to previous lessons. It's definitely a lot different now. About 5 months now. Almost 5 months now. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful teacher. Or a teacher that's invested. I was really this is more common than I would like to admit. Oh, he could tell. Okay, so he's reading. Okay, so he's reading your emotional status too, that you're being discouraged. Okay. Cool. You'd be surprised how how much more frequent that I would like to admit that when someone is in a mentor position or a teaching position where they get to the point where the problem is not them, the problem is the student, or the problem is you, right? And that happens quite often, like more often than I would like to admit in my time with experience, even at like experience with being in a teaching position or mentor position. We have to remember that even the teacher and the professor and stuff, whatever their situation is, they are also human. So sometimes even it's not to excuse it, right? It's not to excuse it. However, when people get brutally beaten and discouraged, even teachers get discouraged, right? Over time, like the fictitious always sends me these Reddit posts about the current climate, at least in the United States, where like we have to remember even teachers are humans, right? So I know how that sounds. It's like, well, duh. It's like, well, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. Teachers can get discouraged to the point where they don't care anymore as well. So it's far more like it's kind of a narrative right now where, oh, lots of students don't care enough as well, that the teacher themselves has also stopped caring. And then you have this mutual indifference in learning. Like, oh, hey, here's the material. If you can't get it, that's not my problem. It's your problem. And then it's got to that point. It's more frequent now than it's ever been, at least in the United States. I don't know where you are, no excuses, but it does feel like times are kind of tough to find this like mutual win-win situation between the teacher and students. I'll be honest, that is where my fear of Chinese comes from. I didn't understand. I keep getting tones wrong. I was made to feel like I was incompetent because of that. I just stopped entirely. Oh, so you have tried Chinese before. Yeah, teachers are honestly a foundation for learning, and people need to realize that more. Your parents are too, like your friends are too. I just feel like teaching and learning itself is the foundation of pretty much being human, and somehow it become just one thing. Like what I mean is, teachers do amazing. Like, yes, they are the foundation for learning. At the same time, teaching is interpersonal. It involves a collective, right? It involves a collective. So like the students have to also be willing to learn, and the teacher is outside of the teacher being willing to teach. The students are also responsible for a willingness to learn, and it is when the student is willing to give time and the teacher is willing to give time that magic happens, right? The classic magical thing. The student becomes a superstar and the teacher gets the reward of seeing the student grow up and mature. But nowadays it's a rarer sight than I would like to imagine. There's less of it. I kind of feel ambivalent all the time. I wanted to be a teacher, by the way. That was my thing. Oh, you're born and bred in the USA? Okay. Then the sentiments are transferable. I'm born and raised in the United States as well. And I spent most of my time in the formal education system. And I'm a millennial. So maybe even more so. I don't know if you're familiar, but anyone who's grown around my age, classically, it was the generation that the vast majority of people went to college. It was the last generation where formal education was still like the standard. Oh, you're a millennial too? Okay. Yeah. So it can be really tough. It kind of hurts to see how the teaching, the relationship between students and teachers have kind of deteriorated quite a bit. Who's at fault is not what we're discussing here. It's a lose-lose situation, I think. I don't think anyone's winning by pushing and pointing and prodding and blaming, right? Yeah, don't be daunted though. So you have learned Chinese before, or you have tried Chinese before. I don't even know if I'm getting the tones right, so it doesn't bother me, I guess. I don't have a teacher yelling at me though, I suppose.